So I just want to welcome everybody to our very first Wizard session. We're kicking it off. We're super excited that everybody, was willing to come and listen to Clint and I again, and we're excited to share some knowledge with everybody. Um, Hopefully, is everybody seeing my share here with the session? Or all right, good deal. So let's get us started. We're going to go through some things. Talk about some features and things. And then Clint's going to do a presentation today on WQL performance optimization. But first, Clint and I, we have some shared pastimes that we're big, fans of: programming, weightlifting, forward-looking statements. And so as we're going to do some, things with extend, forward-looking statements are bound to happen. The product statement: don't make any purchasing decisions based on things we say. We might say some crazy stuff. So just remember that one. IntelliJ. When's the last time you thought about the IntelliJ plugin version? Maybe the last KSS call? So it's 3.73.2 is the latest version. Make sure you're up to date. If you're not, you might have some problems. Who's using IntelliJ anymore? App Builder's where it's at. All right. Used to be DevRel Corner, but now we've got DevRel Divinations. We've got Nick joining us today. Nick, what kind of DevRel action we got going on?
Well, hello, everyone. And I echo what everyone else has said. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Chris, for organizing this. We're honored in developer relations to have the most badass, apologies for my French, and awesome start to community events here in the dev program. We are thrilled to have you guys here. And I'm actually super excited about this main thing that I want to announce, which is we have a developer pulse survey. If you've been around the block a few times, you remember we did an NPS survey in the past. This is the successor to that. It is a very fancy, standard, dare I say, scientific survey that is going to stay the same year over year. So, with that being said, you should take it, folks. So we have a link in the forum post. I believe you guys have the ability to ping everyone. I put it to the host and panelists. But today is actually the last day to take the developer pulse survey. So today is a great day for you to do that. It doesn't take very long, maybe 3 minutes tops. And we in product management at Workday are looking very, very closely at this. The community is what it's all about. We want to make things that make your lives better. And this is a great way for us to do that.
Awesome.
So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll say I took it. It's very quick. So, just plan to get that done if you haven't done it. All right, it's easy and it's going to help.
Thank you, team.
All right. One thing I wanted to call out here. Let me open this post. This LoveNote posted this yesterday. There's a known issue where the functional areas could be missing for your extend apps in both implementation preview and sandbox preview tenants. I've seen this issue in the past. It's pretty easy to reconcile this. So if you look at this post, it has instructions, and I'll go and throw this in the chat. But you may run into issues where your app's just not working as expected when you go into those tenants. So make sure that you check this out. I'm sure at some point Workday will have a resolution in place, so you won't have to do this. But for now, especially with the big update coming, make sure you take a look at that. All right. For product feature, this was one that was covered on the DPUC last week. This is a huge improvement, huge quality of life. No more going into the orchestrations that you want to copy and selecting all the steps you want to copy, copying and pasting, right? We can now import the orchestrations directly into the new apps that you're building. This is fantastic, especially when we have things like the OSK, right? We have the starter kit with tons of functionality. And go in now, pick what you want, and import them directly in. Huge improvement, quality of life. Again, the DPUC covered this last week as well, so check out that post, and I will link the product update here from Dan. Good information in here on how to do it. Pretty straightforward. So take a look at that. Take advantage. One thing I wanted to mention is a pro tip for the forums before we get into the presentation. So one thing I like to do on the forums is have my own custom section. There's certain posts that I frequent, and searching for them is annoying, and I don't want to have a bunch of bookmarks. So what I do is I actually have a custom section over here called My Links. You can name it whatever you want, and you can actually create links directly to things. So for example, the DPC, I can go to the category, but that has all posts in that category, right? But I like having a post that'll take me directly to the DPC schedule post. And so I can, find the latest one and check it out if I miss it. And you can do these for anything. They don't have to be forum posts or forum links either. You can link to anything. So let me show you how to do this real quick. If we go down here, there's a little plus button to add a custom section, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name it Clint Posts, which let me tell you is actually a bad idea because there's so many good Clint posts that it would just like clobber the whole side. But that'll be our example here. So let's say actually a style guide, right? So we have this really slick style guide. And of course, I didn't grab the link. Do that real quick. Because, the style guide's important. You should be checking it every so often. All right, so there's a style guide. I'm going to copy the link, go back here, plug that in. Just do the whole URL. Now it's going to shorten it to a relative URL. Save it, and now I've got Clint Posts, link to the style guide, and I get to it nice and easy. I think this is like a super useful thing. I don't know a lot of people take advantage on the forums or not, but it's a pretty cool way to keep track of posts that you might want to frequent. So and it's easy to do. All right. I think it was developer release notes. There was one thing I wanted to highlight on here. All right, sorry, just checking on chat. All right. And again, apologies, we're just getting familiar with some of the webinar features that maybe are a little different from what we've done in the past. So it's just fumbling around a little bit. Developer release notes. There was an update just a few days ago. There's some new Workday Graph data sources that are available. Specifically supplier and supplier contracts, which is awesome. We're finally seeing more expansion of data source availability in Graph, which is something that we really need, right? To get it to be kind of a first-class citizen. So if you're building an app and you're working with supplier data, supplier contract data, check out Graph and see if it'll suit your needs. There's some new mutations available, which means the ability to like make updates rather than just reads. And something that we're not going to go into as far as a demo today, but I think maybe next month we'll demo this. There's some new input prompt values that you can use for graph mutations, to where basically you can do queries within the prompt. So you can, it's almost like having a subquery to dynamically populate parameters in your graph query, right? So it makes it so that you can, for example, do a search against a specific string for some sub dependency and get the results, and then use those results in the query itself, right? So it makes it kind of a dynamic feature. And this is something that we'll try to demo next month. Didn't have time to prepare for it since this is like hot off the presses. But I did want to highlight that that's something that's available. And there are some examples in the release notes as well. So check that out. All right, let's see. I think that is everything I had to cover here. Note the post. We do have a link to GitHub where we were hosting the assets for these presentations, the PowerPoint, and the app code that we have as a sample. Those are out there now. If you have any problems with any access or anything, just let me know. But it is a public repository, so it should be available for anybody to go download. But do let us know if you run into any problems. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Clint, and he's going to talk about WQL performance.
Alrighty, let me take the share over.
Yep. I got to find. There we go. All you, man.
Move a couple of these windows around. One moment, please, whilst I get everything in place. Alrighty, everybody, in my best Carney voice, do you want to go faster? Alrighty, let's talk about WQL. Now, we're going to talk about two specific things here. And this is going to be about measuring performance and then about optimizing performance. And well, we're going to see that those two things kind of overlap in a lot of ways. It may sound like a simple topic, but there's really quite a lot of depth and detail here that we get to play with. Why bother? And the answer is more than just cause. See, why bother? Why would we try to tune our WQL? And the answer to that, the real answer, we'll talk about the stuff that's actually on the slide in a sec, but the why bother is the way that you write your WQL or the way that you access your data is going to significantly change the performance of your application. Now, obviously, hey, I'm the extend guy. I'm coming at this from an extend world and an extend lens. This is absolutely true in your integration world as well. The imperatives are slightly different, but from an app standpoint, this is going to be a really important thing. And you're going to see this mostly when we're dealing with apps. When we're dealing with apps, that WQL performance is really important. Now, before I dive into this, I just want to give a quick shout out to Todd Tarpley and Jared Jaffa for all the help that they gave me when setting all this thing up. Parts of this are things that Todd and I did as a presentation at DevCon, and some of the testing that you'll see a little later on was helped by a bunch of other people. So thanks, everybody. Something about it takes a community. So first thing I'm going to talk about is user experience and scalability. We're going to talk about the idea that we want to make an app that's responsive. If every time that user clicks on a page, they have to sit and twiddle their thumbs and wait and bored and, oh, this is going to take forever, that's not a happy user. We want to make our users happy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next slide or two about scalability because there's some important things that we want to talk about here. It's not just about making it fast. It's about making it fast and keeping it fast as your apps grow. Now, mostly how we're going to do this, because there's going to be some trial and error. I can't just give you a playbook and say, here you go. This is going to make your WQL quick. That doesn't work. This is going to be more like going to the optometrist. You know, the whole, is A better? How about now? Is this better? Is that better? We're going to be doing that A-B approach. And one of the big things that I want to talk about here is what I'm going to call the 1 second rule. If your WQL is coming back in less than a second, stop putting effort into it. It's just not going to get a whole lot better. This is a noisy system, and you're going to see that things bounce around a bunch, a few hundred milliseconds per call in a lot of cases. So if you're under a second, it's not worth your time to start trying to optimize more than that. When should you optimize? Before user testing. Trust me on this one. What's going to happen is you're going to start developing. You're going to get something that works. You're going to put it in front of the users, and then you're going to get pulled away to other things. I mean, the greatest lie developers tell to themselves, oh yeah, I'll fix that later. You won't fix that later. Believe me, learn from my mistakes. So what you want to do is get it working, show it to the users, and then right there, start doing your optimization. Now, before we optimize, we need to know how to measure. Now, don't even bother reading this slide. I'm just going to do this live because this is more fun and more interesting. If I want to measure my performance, I'm going to go to a Workday tenant. And I'm going to go to a task called Edit Report Performance Log Settings. So when you come back and are looking at the recording, you'll see that in the slide deck, and you just pull it out of there. And what's going to happen is you'll notice, wait a minute, I've got report settings and I've got WQL log settings. there's another tab here. This is the key. And you'd be surprised how many people don't actually know that this exists. You want to set it to enabled. You want to pick the data sources that it's enabled for. You need to give it a log name, but you never actually reference it. And you need to set this up on whatever day it is. And I usually just go to like 9 o'clock at night and hit OK. That's it. That's all we got to do. Now we need to run our WQL. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. With this wizard session, I've got an interactive WQL runner. There's one up in the app catalog that even has the AI gateway stuff enabled, which is very cool. It was just a little more complicated and I wanted a simple tool. So this AI gateway one is a lot of fun, very cool. Check it out. Or if you go up to the Git that we've supplied, there's an interactive WQL runner here. Did anyone else here, back in the day, use the tool for Oracle application development, Toad? It had the great little ribbit when you started it up. I couldn't get the ribbit, but I did include the frog. So now I'm going to run this WQL data. So now you can see, hey, I've got 589 records back. It tells me how long it took, and here's the JSON. Let's see what that looks like in my performance logs. Now I'm going to go to View Report Performance Logs. In WQL logs, you can see, hey, I've got a log that just appeared. I hit View. Boom, here we are. See, I'm not alone in the Toad world. This number here is the most important number on the page, total execution time. Everything else tells you more details, which will help you optimize. We're going to come back to a bunch of those items, but this is the total execution time. It took about 1.5 seconds to do the thing that I just ran. Because this total CPU execution time is bigger than the total execution times, it meant we applied multiple threads. You can't really control that. That's something that the system's going to optimize. And if we look down here at the field performance metrics, it'll tell us which fields took the time. So in this case, primary work phone took the bulk of the time. What this gives us is it gives us the ability to do that. Is that better now? Is that better now? We can run a couple of different WQLs. We can change different WQL in here. Let's run a slightly different one. So if we grab something like this, we can run different WQL anytime we want. This one's going to take a little bit of time. And you can see that this is now chewing its way through a piece of information. We're going to get a smaller return count. And see, this one took like 10 seconds to come back. But we can now look at it and it'll tell us, hey, here's my total execution time. CPU execution time's nice and heavy. Hey, and this is the field that took all the time. As a consequence, we can start doing that testing. We can start saying, hey, you know what? This is what's causing my problem. Maybe if I can take this field out, maybe I can get this field a different way. This is going to be hugely powerful for you. But there's another pretty big elephant in the room. As a matter of fact, there are 2 elephants in this particular slide. And John Sheng, if you're in the audience, this is the slide that I was referencing on the forum this morning. There's 2 things that happen. What we just measured is the WQL execution time. Let me turn on the annotates because I need to scribble. So what we're measuring here is this WQL execution time. You'll notice that the WQL execution time was always a little bit lower than the time that I was showing on the page. You may not notice that because I was going pretty fast, but what you'll find is that the API call, so the API call to actually run the WQL has some overhead. It's usually a few hundred milliseconds. In this case, it was about 350. That's going to vary with server load and time and a bunch of other things here. And what you'll find is this often is going to be a little bit of overhead. So if you can use the batch protocol to put a bunch of your WQL items together, if you're making 8 or 10 WQL calls, you batch all those together at 300 milliseconds a call, you know what? That starts to be non-zero. That starts to be something that might be worth doing. Now, the other elephant in the room here is you'll notice the first one is quite a lot higher. That is something that is an artifact that is because I ran this in a dev tenant. Not that dev tenants happen to be slower, it's the fact that this dev tenant doesn't get a lot of traffic. Workday, when it's running report items, uses a tool called an ORS, object reporting system, and a bunch of other stuff. And the node, when that node and the ORS first have to initialize, that takes non-zero time. However, despite the fact that you often see this sort of behavior where you get that one slow node and then everything else takes the same amount of time, you see that in a dev tenant because in this particular dev tenant, there's like 4 of us with access. None of those ORs or nodes were initialized. In a production environment, you almost never see this. So watch out for this, especially if you're just like doing bulk tests. Like I ran this using an Excel spreadsheet. Yes, I'm old. Just to blast this out here. And that's right, Paula. Yep, this is a cold start thing going on behind the scenes. It's got a cold start a bunch of stuff up. It usually takes about 3/4 of a second. And once that's cold started, everything after that runs fast. How does Workday deal with concurrency on the back end? Oh my, that is a very deep and big question, and unfortunately one that changes over time. So I won't be able to go into that here. Put that up on the dev forums. I think that could be a really great topic, especially if we can get a few of the other senior techs to dig into it. That is a very cool topic though, and there's some really neat things that happen there. Now, Dennis, to your question, when you're running these logs because you run it 3 times in a row and the variation execution time was just much of a variation from any of the enhancements, you'll see that this is a noisy system. And that's why that 1-second rule comes into play. Most of those variations are going to be a few hundred milliseconds. You know what? You're going to get that much noise in the system, whether you like it or not. It's totally going to happen. And as you can see, I mean, this is noisy. This is a single system. I was the only person in that system at the time here. And what I'm going to get you to do is start just accepting that amount of noise there. So let's see here, a few other questions coming in here. Let me just hit the clear my drawings. So let's see here, is the REST API using delivered worker search REST versus WQL, which one's faster? Typically, the REST API is going to have less latency. It has less stuff that has to spin up. It's very focused. Where WQL has much broader reach. It's that great old Nintendo thing. The broader your reach, the more time it takes to do stuff. The more focused you are, the less time it takes to do stuff. As a matter of fact, I'm going to show you that exact Nintendo up and down in about 3 slides. So generally speaking, your REST API is going to be your fastest for focused data retrieval. Whereas when you're dealing with bulk data retrieval, I think you'll find that WQL compares very favorably. When you start getting a lot of data, the fact that the pages are much bigger, WQL is really, really slick. It's going to work extremely well for that. And yeah, people are going to think I paid you for that comment. Let's talk about a couple of sample optimization strategies for a second. I'll get to the other questions there, Ed and Paula, just in a second. But let's jump into this one. Because the first thing that I'm going to tell you to do when you're trying to optimize your WQL is find a better data source. And we're going to see that some of those data sources can be incredibly fast. I'm going to play around a little bit with some security. We're going to see that security can really slow you down. And this is going to hurt me because you all know how much I love security, right? So it's going to hurt me to say this, but we're going to see that sometimes security is going to be a real performance drag, and you're going to need to have some other ways around it. We're going to talk about some creative approaches, crazy approaches, might be a little bit of insanity. I'm good at the insanity part. And last but not least, we're going to play around with handling joins. But what I really want to talk about here is finding a better data source because, Arnav, this is exactly what we're talking about. And so to that earlier question about, hey, what's faster? Well, you know what? If I take something like all workers. It's got huge reach. It literally sees all workers. It's not indexed. It sees everything. There's no index lag, no problems at all, but it's slow. I mean, it's really slow. Like this is noticeably the slowest, one of the slowest data sources in your tenant. If we add in an index, well, hey, you know what? It's going to be faster. But when we start talking about things like worker from name is often even going to be faster than the REST APIs. So your REST APIs tend to be the lowest latency way to get stuff as long as you're getting small data, less than a page. But worker from name will usually blow the doors off of pretty much everything. And I've used this particular data source to solve a lot of people's production problems. That's why I'm saying it over and over and over again. Worker from name can really be your friend. How much can it be your friend? This is what I meant by scalability. I've got 3 data sources pulling the same set of items here. All workers, worker from name, and workers from HCM reporting. You'll notice that all workers and workers from HCM reporting here is going to, thanks Christian, great answer. And I'm even going to highlight one of the situations where RAS can actually be faster than WQL. It's a little bit later on. Again, people are going to think that I was going to, again, you guys are awesome. Keep coming, keep coming. So I've got all workers and workers from HCM reporting. In a dev tenant, it's hard to tell the difference. And yes, Arnav, exactly right. Workers from name only returns 20 records here. And it only returns active workers. So not going to give you terms, not going to give you retirees, not going to give you a lot of people here. Work from name is very limited. But I want you to look at what that scalability looks like. This is an impl tenant used with permission that has about 20,000 workers in it. What I want you to notice how fast things get. Worker from name was actually faster in that impl tenant than it was in my dev tenant. But again, we're talking like noise here. All workers took 3.5 seconds. Adding an index, doing the same thing. This is actually returning all users named Liz. Really, that's what this query was. And all workers took 3.5 seconds. Workers for HCM reporting took 1.2 seconds. Just, I mean, notice how awesome that is. And the bigger it gets, the more that spread is going to happen. That index is hugely powerful. It's really going to make things work here. Worker from name in a 20,000 worker item returned the same set as all workers 100 times faster here. Think about this, 100 times faster. And yeah, I think you'll find that worker from name is a little easier because you don't end up with a double contains and a bunch of other things. So this can be hugely powerful and it scales incredibly well. But again, what's the trade-off? Everything in software is a trade-off, right? So everything in software means because it's focused, it gets great performance. But if it doesn't meet your use case, you may have to go out to something like workers for HCM reporting. So this is why I think you start seeing that trade-off. All workers will get you the most of all the answers here. It's the broadest thing. It is the shotgun. Great analogy. But when we really focus things down, we get that very accurate pull here. Work for name is your friend. And yes, Srinivas, there is a time. Let me just pause for a second. So to answer Srinivas's question about sometimes you don't want to use an index data source. Sometimes all workers is the right data source. And I don't want you to come away from thinking this, I should never use that. There is a very specific time you need to use this. You need to use this when you're dealing with index lag. Indexing takes time, and in a lot of cases, it can take time that your application can't deal with. So in those cases, you're going to use all workers. All workers is the right answer there. But you have to understand that all workers is going to scale slower, and you're going to need to be very careful to nail down your where clause to get things as tight as you possibly can. It means your optimization will be different if you're using all workers than if you're using worker from name. And again, everything's trade-offs here. None of these are ever the wrong answer. They just may be inappropriate for what you're doing. Great conversation, folks. Keep coming. Thanks, Nick, for jumping in on that enable monitoring. Very cool. Now, I mentioned we did parts of this at DevCon, and I had one remarkably common question come out of it. And let me do this live because it's more fun. Was how do I find a WQL alias? I had like a half a dozen people ask. So let me just do a quick little step through how to find a WQL alias. First off, there's a data sources report. A lot of times people are like, well, how did you know about worker from name? This is how I knew. I pulled up the data sources report, noticed the space in between data and source. For all of us who are used to data sources being one word, took me a minute to find this report. You can do a filter here on the data source, and then when you hit the related actions, the WQL alias is here. And yes, we can, yep, the fields and what type of fields you're calling will absolutely matter for execution times. We're going to talk a lot about that. On the data sources, so I've clicked into one of the data sources for a 1094C, it's a tax form. Inside the field name, the WQL alias is found again on the related actions. I want you to notice that this WQL alias, box 1, is not intuitive for name of ALE member. It is always worth looking these things up. And yep, absolutely, Paula, there is a data source in REST API. You can go check those data sources and the fields that are on them in the REST API. I've known fewer people actually use that, though. So that's why I wanted to highlight this one. And the other one that really trips people up is looking up the WQL alias of a calc field. Calc fields are available in WQL. Almost 100% of them are. There's a couple exceptions, but the vast majority are. To find the alias, you go to additional info and then look under advanced. So it's 2 clicks, and that's why this one trips up a lot of people. Venue, I have advised people to put an index onto business model component business objects. Yes, I absolutely have. Perfect. Thanks, Polly. Okay, you're right on the ball here. This WQL alias doesn't change. If I change the name of this calc field, the alias does not change. And that's a really good thing. We don't want things to break because you changed a name. Awesome, Josh. Yeah, absolutely. You can actually use WQL to find WQL aliases for calc fields. Totally works here. And as I said, there's this great little AI gateway app here that allows you to look up things with natural language. And last but not least, you can convert a report to WQL. I do this a lot. Like if I'm just getting started out with something, I'm going to say, I'm just going to pick something here. Be nice. Live demos are always dangerous, right? I live on the edge. So you notice I don't even need to own the report, and I can pull this out, and it's going to give me all the calc fields. It's what I really find this useful for is building, like, who wants to build that index on the index data source? I don't want to build that. Like, here you go, guys. It'll do it for you automatically. I'm a big, big fan. Now, Ed, I'm really interested in hearing what you had to say on this one, because guess what my next slide was? Where clauses are actually not sensitive to order. In reports, reports are sensitive to the order of your filter clauses. But WQL isn't. We've tested this quite heavily with some very large data sets. Ran up to like a 300,000 element data set here. And by reversing these two, so in this case, relevant worker trims it down to like 30 objects, and contains F3 is a very slow call that turns this into about 7 or 8,000 objects. And what's going to happen here is when we run the report performance metrics by reversing those clauses, it doesn't actually change anything. And we've tested this on not just my data, we've tested on 4 different dev tenants and 2 impl tenants now. And I do not have any data that I can back up where clauses being sensitive to order. So if you have data, send me a note. I would love to see it. Tashar, to answer your question, which is the preferred approach for JSON export, RAS or WQL? It depends on the data size. So RAS or WQL, if you're dealing with less than 10,000 instances, I use WQL just because it's easy. And I'm an old SQL guy, so it's the way I'm comfortable with doing it. RAS, on the other hand, if it's more than 10,000 instances, I have too many heads. Awesome, welcome. RAS, on the other hand, if you're dealing with more than 10,000 instances and you don't want to deal with the pagination, RAS is a cleaner way to do it. Yeah, and honestly, on this whole order of where clause, I went into this test. I built this test just to show it, and then it didn't work. And I showed it to Todd, and he's like, "No, that's got to work." And he went away and he tested it, and he took it to Jared to test it. we can't find any actual order of the where clause. So every day's a school day. And Srinivas, sometimes it doesn't convert the RBOs here. What you'll find with the RBOs is sometimes it struggles to look them up because behind the scenes it's trying to look them up. The RBOs may actually work, but if there's more than a couple of steps or there's some complex security, the convert tool can't figure out how to do it. It may still work. But yeah, it's usually because the complex relationship on the back end, and there's nothing we can do about that on at our level. Is collection? If you're querying the WQL and you return more than about 27 or so items, you need to set it to true, not in WQL. If you're querying more than WQL items, WQL pages are by default 10,000 instances. So you don't need is collection if you're getting less than 10,000 in WQL. It's when you're using the REST API, the REST API default page size is 20. So if you're getting more than 20 items, I would probably set the limit up because you can set the limit on a REST API up to 100. If you're only getting like 27, I wouldn't use is collection. It's a lot slower. So yes, exactly right, Nick. Is collection is very, 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 very powerful and can really bog your tenant down. So this is one of those ones where you really want to be careful with how you actually use as collection. Generally speaking, what I tell people, most of the time you're not pulling more than 10,000 instances back. If you're thinking, hey, I should turn this collection on, don't do that. Use WQL and just, it'll pull back a 500 or 600 records without a problem. I mean, you see, I'm running 500-600 record pulls here in a couple of seconds. So I would say definitely just use some WQL there. Awesome question, folks. Keep them coming. Let's talk security for a second. Now, you've seen the meme, inside you there's 2 wolves and Chief O'Brien is sorry about the transporter accident. That's where I'm at with this one because I love security. I really, really, really think that security in Workday is usually the best way to go. But there's a problem with it. And that problem is that iterative processing is slow. And security, when you're dealing especially with constrained or intersection security, it has to apply that to every single field that you pull back. And if you're pulling back hundreds of fields, and I've absolutely seen incredibly large number of fields and instances coming back. When it has to do that check for each and every data element being returned, it can really slow things down. Because security is applied at the field level, it's going to be multiplicative. So the more fields you pull in your WQL and the more instances that it pulls, that sounds Cartesian, right? It totally is. Balanced against that, if you are using the unconstrained security structure, it can be a lot faster. However, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Yes, it's faster, but you now take on the work. Now you have to build whatever the security filtering or security was going to filter out for you, you have to filter out with a where clause. And because that works at an instance level and not at a field level, it can be significantly faster. So this is where I struggle, because on the one hand, I want to tell you, use security, because security is the best way to go. And writing secure code is hard. On the other hand, the performance increase is so big that sometimes this is viable and defensible in an application. How big is it? So in the source code, you'll find that I've built a simple little application, and that simple little application has like one object in it that I loaded 30,000 instances into. Secure by target is turned on here. And if I run a secure element to return 306 of those 30,000 using security, using constrained security, it takes about 4.5 seconds. And what happens if I take this and run it using a WQL statement with a where clause to return the same 306 records using unconstrained access? How much faster do you think it is? Give me an answer in chat. What do you think? 2 times, 5 times, maybe 10 times? Who wants to jump in? How fast do you think it's going to be? Stephen and Peter know the answer. It's 100 times faster. Tony going for $1. Nicely called. Nicely called. It is 100 times faster. And that's why we're talking about this, because there are times where you need that performance boost. The trade-off here, though, is I love the Dr. Evil memes. The trade-off is that this is a ton of extra work for you as a developer. You now need to do everything that Workday Security was doing for you, and you need to make it configurable, and you need to make it update safe. It's a ton of work. But sometimes if you need that speed, that ton of work is there. Now, how do I know that security is causing me the problem? See this field? In my report performance log, it's going to say is, and then my object name, accessible, and it'll tell you the total amount of time it took to work on this. On the first one, you can see it took like 14.5 seconds of processor time. Wah! It was multi-threaded, but again, with enough server load, you may not even get a multi-thread on this. This thing on a heavy server might have taken 15 seconds to run. Ouch. So it hurts me to say it, but sometimes this is the right answer. You need to know when that right answer is the right answer, but used with caution, this can give you some really big performance boosts. Now, another thing that catches people is joins. Again, everything that we're trying to deal with here is avoiding iterated processing, and joins are iterated processing. It's, we'll look at something, I've got a value, I go find some more values, I join them together. The more joins you have, the worse your performance is. Now, this is the WQL that I ran a little bit earlier today, and it's a slow join in a dev tenant. What I want you to notice is this takes 10 seconds to run and like only returns a few hundred elements. Like what? And this is repeatable. You'll find this is 10 to 15 seconds across most dev tenants. And what's slow about it is this calc field. And you can see this calc field takes like 18.5 seconds of processor time to chew its way through. And all it is, literally, it goes to benefit elections and finds gym memberships. Now, the first thing that you can do, in this case, you can change this to an RBO. Now, this is going to be one of those optometrist thing, is this faster sort of things. Why? Because sometimes the RBO is faster, related business object, sometimes the calc field is faster. In this case, it's pretty consistently about 10% faster. I mean, it's only about a second faster. Is that enough? Sometimes it is. Not always, though. What about some other ways that we could approach this? Now, Christian earlier in the chat mentioned that sometimes there's a big difference between RAS and WQL, and this is actually one of those times. The specific circumstance that I have seen, and this one follows, I'm doing a lookup related values against a target with more than a page of instances. In that case, RAS is going to be faster, and a lot faster, like noticeably so. In this case, when I run that same report, does the same thing, gives me the same data back, it comes back in about 5 seconds. So when you're doing lookup related value calc fields in WQL, watch your target size. If your target size is big, try flipping it to RAS. It'll probably perform a whole lot better. I mean, yes, this is a very specific circumstance, right? I mean, it's a lookup related values calc field against a target with more than 10,000 instances, but this is really common. I have used this particular trick no less than 4 times in production apps to achieve a significant increase in speed. And I mean, it's a trade-off. You end up with a tenant instance. You need to have a report. But it's a trade-off that gives you 50% more data pull speed. That's worth it. That's a trade-off I'll take. You get to have a report. I like the way you put that, Nick. Are there other things that we can do? Well, yeah, actually there are. Now, this is the approach creatively. What I want you to think about here, and the way to think about how do I increase performance in WQL. How I approach performance is I reduce the number of instances that I need to look at. The more instances that Workday needs to plow through to get you your result set, the longer it's going to take. So in this WQL, let me just scroll back here for a second. What did I do? I was asked, hey, I want a list of all employees with gym memberships. And I approached that exactly the same way that everybody else does too, right? I started off by saying, hey, here's my list of workers. I want a list of workers, and I'm going to join in whoever's got a gym membership. Totally sensible way to approach it. But the problem is, in a dev tenant, there's about 509 active workers, about 20 of which have gym memberships. So what happens is this execution plan loops through all 509 of these, goes out to this calc field, and this calc field looks at 40,000 additional benefits, filters that down to 20, and then returns if there's one there or not. So this execution plan looks at like 2 million instances. It's not real fast because it's going to plow through a ton of data. Well, is there another way that I could look at this? And the answer is yes. What I can do is I can look at the additional benefits elections, filter that down to 20, and then look up the worker. Like, really, it's one of those things when you think about it for a second here. Oh, Sophie. Oh, hold that thought. I will see what I can do, but I don't think I have that one. Oh, cross your fingers. But in this case, I can actually reverse that. And you can see my 10-second query drops down to 3.4 seconds. Why does that work? Because I look at 20 odd elements and then look back at 509 workers for each of those 20. In that case, I'm looking at 15,000 instances rather than 2 million. And Michael, unfortunately, no, there is actually no way to expose the execution plan because there's really no consistency with it. However, once you get a feel for this and you've built enough of these, you'll start to look at that. Okay, my primary business object, I've got about 20 of them. I'm doing lookups out to another 500 elements items. That's going to be quick. If I'm looking at, 500 items and I'm doing a lookup against a target of over 40,000, yeah, that's going to have trouble. And Greg, yep, unfortunately, no, the order of fields used in a where clause does not matter. And right, Stephen, that's exactly how this works. It is faster to pull the benefits plans and then grab the members within. So some of the database analogies work, and that's the problem, because remember, we're going against a Java object graph here. We're not going against a database. So the old way that we build optimized SQL, we've all, well, some of us old people have done it, shake my cane at the world. What happened is we would just take everything, throw it in one big SQL statement and throw it over the fence to a really heavily optimized database engine. I mean, I worked at IBM. I worked at A200 Steels where they built the DB2 engine. Yes, I'm not old. And there was a building of people working on that DB2 engine. A Java object graph doesn't have that. Oh yeah, don't get me started on DB2. Oh, pains. But what I want you to think about here is, even given that sheer amount of effort that they built into making that WQL work, this is a wrapper around a reporting engine. So this is powerful, but it's powerful in a very different way. Knowledge of reporting is going to be more important here than knowledge of SQL, because your SQL instincts will sometimes lead you down the garden path. Ask me how I know. However, this leads me to another interesting way of attacking this problem, and something that I have done here quite frequently. Like, I've done this in 4 apps now. What you can do is, sometimes your WQL, when you put everything all together, it's just slow, and it's always going to be slow. And usually it's around joins. I remember this one WQL that I was given to optimize. It had 26 lookup related values. 26. And like, it had 4 where on clauses, and it was just it was absolutely a way to get the data, and it worked. However, the real however here is it didn't work in 24 seconds, and they couldn't use it to build a page. It just, I mean, even if even if it does, answer in 20 seconds, who wants to sit waiting for a page for 20 seconds? What can we do? Well, sometimes, and more than sometimes, we actually know what's going on behind the scenes and what data can connect to what data better than the WQL processor does. We know specific things about our data. So what do? We can actually just force that into an orchestration. And it allows us to pull exactly the data set that we want very, very quickly. So in this case, I can run that same join between additional benefits and workers, and I can get that information back vastly quicker just by pulling exactly the data that I need, not worrying about extra data, including indexes whenever I can. Remember, model component business objects allow you to specify indexes. That can be your friend. I've certainly used that before. And then do a streaming elements on it. Like, join loops are remarkably fast. In this case, this was the slowest transformation that I saw on it, and that includes all the orchestration overhead. The fastest one was under 2 seconds. So yes, sometimes doing a ye olde Java hash map, not really the way I'd probably go with a stream transformation if I was inside of Studio. If I need to do those sorts of transformations and joins, sometimes it is going to be faster to pull that data out, because the processor doesn't know enough about the data that I know about the data to make it work right. So yes, and yes, absolutely, Arnav. Batch protocol for data lookup. If it thinks it can get away with doing things parallel, it does. The batch protocol is a huge performance increase, and that gets right back to, sorry for the scrolling. That gets right back to this page. If I'm running that REST API over and over and over again with 300 milliseconds of overhead every time I run it, if I'm running 10 separate REST calls to get to my page, like that's a couple of seconds worth of time. By collapsing that down to a single batch protocol call, that's going to be noticeably quicker for your users and dead easy for you to implement. It's just the way to go. I'm a big fan of the batch protocol. Check out Chris's KSS on it if you're not familiar with it. And that brings us to the end. And Greg, just in case you didn't see it, apologies for the scrolling. Order of the where clause. Thanks, Nick. Where clauses are not sensitive to order. And that takes us almost to time here. That's the end of the presentation. Does anyone have any other questions that they wanted to bring up? Is Graph faster than REST and WQL? No. Graph can sometimes batch together REST or WQL calls, but Graph itself often uses WQL under the covers. So if Graph is going to be about as fast as WQL in batch protocol. Those are about the same. But the great advantage Graph gives you is it allows you to put together these joins really effectively, and it can do joins really, really well. So I'm not saying don't use Graph. I'm saying Graph's going to be faster if you're doing multiple WQL calls or doing heavy joins. Sometimes it's really quick. JQL or COBOL. I found a COBOL error in PayCalc in 2014. I joined Workday shortly thereafter. I was questioning my life choices.